Hello everyone, welcome to Coding Decoded. My name is Sanchit Dudeja, and जो लोग मेरे को नहीं जानते, those who are new to the channel, let me give a quick introduction to them. I work at SD5 level at a top-notch MNC based out of Noida and have a total of 10 plus years of experience working on back-end technology. And in case you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do that. From the video's title, you would have understood that this is going to be all about JWT token. But before that, let me tell you one of the biggest problem that exists in this industry, which I personally have experienced with new joinees and those who actively give interviews. The problem here है कि whenever we want to learn something new, we go and check it out on YouTube. And most of the creators बहुत ही shallow information provide करते हैं, and the viewers tend to believe that whatever information is provided in that video is complete and holistic. As a result, एक problem create होती है system में, which gives a false kick to the viewers that he and she knows everything, and therefore when they go out in interviews, as the complexity increases, they fail to answer, and उसका एक ही result होता है rejection. So guys, next time when you watch a video, make sure that it is from a credible source. And personally, I'm not against any one of them, but I have seen people claiming that after watching the video, you will get job at fact. It simply hurts. Guys, बहुत बातें इधर उधर की हो गई. Let's focus our attention onto JWT. In this video, we're going to talk about multiple aspects. What is JWT and why do we need it? How does it work? What are its advantages, disadvantages? What makes it so safe that the entire industry is using it from past 10 to 15 years? This is a standard protocol which has been established between a client and server for authentication and authorization. Issues with JWT, ये आपको कोई नहीं बताएगा. What is more secure than JWT? Have you ever wondered about this? कि इससे भी अच्छा कुछ हो सकता है? And lastly, the most important one, low-level design of how to implement a service responsible for generating and validating JWT tokens. The entire code of it. तो बहुत मजा आने वाला है. Do watch the video till the very end and बताना कैसा लगा. Let's take a scenario. The user logs in into your application, mobile, desktop or web, and he wants to do certain operations in the UI depending upon different features exposed. Different calls will be made, get, put, post, delete, for which the server needs to authenticate whether these calls are coming from that particular user or not. For this, the token mechanisms comes into picture. At the time of login, the user passes the user email and password to the server, and server, what it should do? It should generate back the token after establishing that these two values are correct. All the subsequent calls will be made using this token returned by the server at the time of login. Whenever a further API call comes onto the server, it checks whether the token is valid or not. If it is not valid, the calls would be rejected. If those are valid, then the user will be able to perform that operation up. अगर इसका architecture you have to design and you are thinking of this problem for the very first time, what you are going to do? Let me tell you what was my first thought when I read this problem statement. The server at the time of login, when it creates tokens, it can store this value in the database. And whenever subsequent calls will be made onto the server for different operations, it's gonna check in the database whether these tokens exist or not. If those tokens exist, then the operation will be proceeded, otherwise the calls will be rejected. Guys, pause the video for a second and think of the problem with this architecture. Consider the case millions of users come to your application to perform different operations. What the server is going to do? The server will be storing all the users' tokens in the database, as a result of which this server has turned stateful. And ये state management server side पे करना, it's not wise. It makes the server heavy lifted. Apart from performing the regular intended operation, this token management system has to be done by the server, which is not recommended. It increases the overall SLAs of the server and it reduces the performance of the overall system. तो इससे बचे कैसे? The industry wants to move towards stateless server management ताकि server पे load ही ना पड़े tokens को store करने का. And this is where JWT comes into picture. To understand what makes JWT so special, we have to dig deep into the structure of JWT. And guys, ये कोई नहीं बताने वाला, तो ध्यान से सुनना. JWT token has three major parts. The first one is header, the second one is payload, and the third one is signature. Payload represents different parameters that should be sent out to the server from the client that basically represents the user who is trying to access the resource. It has scopes in it, it has user ID in it, it has an expiry value associated telling that this JWT token is valid till what time. The first part represents the algorithm used to generate this token. There are multiple types of algorithm. One could be SHA-256 and other cryptographic algorithms can be used. And the second parameter over here is type, which usually is JWT. In some cases, it is JWE. I'll talk about it later in the video, but अभी इतना समझ लो हेडर के दो पार्ट्स हैं. पेलोड में वो सारा डेटा जाता है जो क्लाइंट को सर्वर तक भेजना है, so as to uniquely identify the user associated with that token. And the last part happens to be the signature, which is equal to this. What do you need to do? You need to generate an HMAC SHA-256 algorithm hash using the base64 URL encoded value that is passed in the header. Plus, you need to concatenate a string dot followed by base64 URL encoding of the payload. This is signed using the secret that is present on the server. This is a private secret generated on the server and kept safely. What does it mean? It means that the secret value is going to reside in the DB at the server and it's going to be fixed. One particular value is going to be used and it is up to the server to decide on that value. Now let's understand how the problem actually got solved using this JWT approach. So let's go back to the same example and understand the sequence of events happening now. Here the user is trying to log in into the application. It passes in the user email and password to the server in the login API call. The server checks whether the user email and password are correct. If those are correct, what it's going to do, it's going to issue a JWT token along with the refresh token. JWT token is the authorization token and the refresh token will be used in future, which follows the same pattern as JWT to actually ask for refreshed values of JWT once the token gets expired. This JWT token is going to have again the three parameters, the headers, the payload and the signature. The signature will be generated using the same algorithm that I talked about and a secret value will be stored at the server. So let me write a secret here so as to represent that it has been stored on the server. Now what's going to happen? In the subsequent calls, this same JWT token is going to be passed during the get operation, post operation, put, delete operations on the server. The server is going to ask the DB for the secret value and it's going to check whether the entire structure of the signature is intact or not as per the parameters passed in JWT token. If the entire structure of JWT is still intact, it's going to allow the user for the operation. The server must validate the authenticity of the token being passed. कहीं ऐसा तो नहीं someone altered that token so as to gain access and perform operations on someone else's behalf. That makes it so important for the server to validate whether the incoming JWT token is genuine and authentic or not. For this, the server uses an algorithm to do that, and let's talk about that algorithm now. At the time of login, the server returned a JWT token, and let's say the JWT token returned was JWT1. Let's call it a combination of h1.p1 payload 1, and as per this algorithm a signature value was generated. For this, the server stored a particular string in the DB which is named as secret, and using the secret the server created a hash and returned this up as a JWT1 token back to the end user, telling that this is your genuine authentic token. Now let's consider in the subsequent call another JWT token came up, JWT2, and it is represented by H2, P2 and S2. What the server is going to do? Server will extract H2 and P2 from it. It's going to pass this string up and extract H2 and P2 values. What it's going to do? It's going to extract the secret as well from the DB. So it has H2, P2 and secret. It has H2, P2 and secret. And it's gonna rerun the algorithm HMAC256 hash onto H2 and P2 to generate S2. And it's gonna check whether the S2 value is same as the value that is being passed over here. If these two matches, then it's gonna say that it is valid in nature, otherwise it's gonna reject that up. तो इस मैचिंग से सर्वर को ये पता लग गया that nobody altered the payload anywhere during the transfer of data from the client to the server. There has been no man in the middle attack, and everything looks good to what server expected. The server can then grant access to the user to perform that operation. Let's try some hands-on on different JWT tokens ताकि अच्छे से समझ आ जाए. For this, there is one Bible website that you should explore, which is JWT.io. Every developer across the globe must have ever visited this website in his lifetime. तो ये पूरी जिंदगी काम आने वाली है. So here they have showcased that this is the sample JWT token in encoded format, and this happens to be its decoded value. तो इसको एक बार validate कर लेते हैं whether this base64 encoded string is actually mapping to this header or not. As you can see, this JWT token has three parts. The first one is header, the second one is payload, and the third one is signature. Now let's extract the header out and see whether it is actually getting decoded into a JSON or not, having type as JWT and algo as HS256. Yes, it is getting decoded, and here the same value is present. The next one over here happens to be the payload that was generated during the login time, and it stores the identity of the user. For example, here the subject happens to be an ID. Usually the subject acts as a unique identifier. In general, in the industry, we use it as user ID. Name is not passed because it is sensitive information, so we usually avoid this. You'll not find name getting passed in JWT tokens anywhere in the industry. You have scopes, which is usually read or write depending upon your use case. And the last one happens to be expiry. So let me just write that up. Expiry represents the time at which this token is going to get expired. And this is a JSON. Let me just copy paste and validate whether it is appropriate or not. And it is invalid. Must be a typo. So let's fix that typo. And you can see it is valid now. Let's go back and paste it over here. Now the server generated another JWT token for me, and this particular portion represents the payload. अब बताओ कि ये किसने डिवाइस करा और इसका कोई स्टैंडर्डाइजेशन है कि नहीं है. स्टैंडर्डाइजेशन है, डेफिनेटली है, and RFCs are used to represent those standards. For example, what we have kgs for measuring weight, RFC 7519 is for the same purpose. Each and every engineer is going to rely on this RFC for anything related to JSON web tokens. And iske andar you'll find each and every detail that pertains to JWT tokens. It will tell you different parameters that can be part of the payload: issued, subject, audience, expiry, issued at, not before, and JWT ID. So और custom values भी डाल सकते हो as per your use case. I will recommend you guys have a cursory look at this document. It's really helpful. Now let's go back to the JWT.io and understand the last portion. Here it says verify signature, and it tells me the algorithm being used. It is asking me to put a secret string. So let me put Sanchit underscore coding decoded. And now it has generated a JWT token which has three parts. As I change the secret, the value gets changed. So that is the beauty of this website. And this happens to be a genuine JWT token generated at runtime. Now think of the case, I go ahead and tamper this up. Let me just remove this W. What's gonna happen? It's gonna say invalid signature. And this is where the beauty, the power of this website is shown. As soon as anyone who has tampered either the payload, the signature part, it's gonna be highlighted over here itself. But for validating this up, you need the signature, the secret. तो ये याद रखना. अब बहुत बातें हो गई. Let me show you guys the real code. Talk less, show more. We are hardcore developers. Guys, I have created two APIs, one to generate JWT token and the other one to validate these tokens up. So let's go step by step and understand the workflow for them. The first thing that I'm going to do over here is to make a post call on API auth login. That's my API path. I'm passing in two parameters, username and password. And this by nature would be a post call because the parameters are going as part of the body. Let's go ahead and see what I have written over here. I have created a login controller that receives everything related to API/auth path, and the first API here is login. The post mapping here is /login, and it matches with my incoming request. What do? I check whether my user email name happens to be equal to user123 and my password happens to be equal to password. These are like two dummy values that I have accepted in the request, and just for simplicity I have compared it with these hard-coded values. Ideally what we need to do in real life application, we will be making a DB call checking these values up whether those are present in DB or not, and if those are present we'll go ahead and generate the JWT token. Let's see what have I written over here. I have created a utility file that manages everything related to generation of the token and validation. So it has two major methods in it, both public in nature, generate token and validate token. So let's go deep into it. Generate token. What does it do? It passes the username extracted from the auth request. So this maps to my incoming request body, and it again has two parameters, username and password. Let's go deep into generate token, and you will see over here that I am extracting the system.current milliseconds. I am creating a date expiry value. I am creating a new JWT token using the builder pattern technique, and here in the subject I set it equal to user ID. I am setting issue.timestamp equal to now, and I am also setting the expiry value, which happens to be equal to the current system milliseconds plus 1 hour. And I generate this token up and return that value. So in my postman, you're going to see a token has been returned, and let's go ahead and decode this token. Let's go ahead on jwt.io and paste this token up. You will see the algorithm used to generate this JWT token, subject equals to user123, which happens to be equal to my username/user ID, issue.timestamp, expiry timestamp. And if I create the difference between these two values, expiry and issue.timestamp, it will be equal to somewhere around 1 hour. So let's do that, and it is 36 seconds, which is equal to 1 hour, exactly the same. That again validates that our algorithm is in place. Now let's go ahead and look at the other part of the code, which happens to be the validation. How does this validation actually occur in code? This is more interesting than generation, and let me just copy paste this up, and I have created another call, API/auth/validate, wherein I'll be passing this token in authorization header. So let's go ahead and add bearer keyword. Remember this as a tip. Authorization, with the authorization keyword, the bearer prefix must be appended when you pass in the token. This happens to be a get call, and let's go ahead and debug its workflow. So what happens over here? I have exposed another API/validate. In the authorization header, I extract that value up. What do? I have added few validations over here. If my header happens to be null, or in case it doesn't start with bearer, what do I say? I say that this is an invalid authorization header, and an error response will be returned. Otherwise, I go ahead and truncate the prefix bearer part because we are interested in the remaining part of the token. So if you go ahead and check what this is equal to, this is currently equal to, it starts with E and ends with K. The bearer has been removed. Now let's go ahead and validate this token, JWT utils.validate, and in validate method, what am I doing? Let's go inside the validate method. The first statement that I have written over here is to split the incoming token by dots so that sub parts could be generated, and we expect the length of the sub part to be equal to 3. In case it is not equal, what do? I am throwing an error saying that unexpected token length, and I'm returning false from here because this token is invalid in nature. This will work as our semantics check because JWT parsing is expensive in nature, and this could act as a first level of filtering. You have to reject calls done by the hacker where the tokens are corrupt just to bombard the server. Once these safety checks are passed, what do? I parse this JWT token using the JWT library. Herein, the most important part is to use the same secret which was used while generating the token up. So as you can see over here at line number 33, James Bond 007 secret was used, and again I'm using the same secret to validate this token up. So let me show you that when I evaluate this up, this will pass. This will be all good. So after the evaluation, I can see subject, issue.timestamp, expiry timestamp, and I now go ahead and change the token to sunset.deja. change the secret to Sanchit Dudeja, what's gonna happen? JWT signature doesn't match locally computed signature. JWT validity cannot be asserted and should not be trusted. In all such cases, I should return false and throw an exception saying the token is not valid. Let's go ahead, and now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna extract claims out of my token. I know it's gonna pass this time. I extract the user ID, I extract the expiry time, and I print those up just to show you guys how things are actually happening. And in the end, I simply return true. In case my token doesn't pass, what's gonna happen? It's gonna say signature exception, and here I'm logging that exception up so that I can track the API calls to different request ID in my logging system, and simply return false. Here as well, in case any unexpected exception occurs, I simply return false from over here. So let's go ahead and see the response of my API. It says token is valid, user ID 123. One important thing that I forgot to tell you at the start of the code is to add necessary dependencies in your POM file. So let's go ahead and check those out. The first one is io.jsonwebtoken. I'm using the artifact ID JWT IO, and I'm provided a version for my dependency. You can use the latest one. This is a slightly older one. Don't forget to add SpringBoot starter security dependency in your project, otherwise it's not gonna work. This is a precursor to it. And along with this, you need to add Java X XML bind library that will be used for marshalling and unmarshalling for basic semantic validation. So this is also necessary for JWT library to operate correctly in your code. Otherwise, you're gonna get some compilation errors. And with what is JWT and why do we need it? How does it work? We've also coded the solution now. Now we are going to talk about what makes it so safe, what are the advantages, disadvantages, and what are the prominent issues with JWT. This is a very important concept, guys, because most of the people won't tell you this. To understand it, let's take a scenario, something similar to what the interviewer might want to discuss you in a high-level interview. Consider the case, there's a hacker which is very naughty. This bad person somehow attacks and extracts your token by man-in-the-middle attack, as a result of which, since now he has access to your token, he can perform any activity on the server on your behalf, which might include reading your private files and modifying those up. It's gonna be a serious threat to the overall security of the web application, and the server must do something about it. इसका solution समझने के लिए we first have to understand how things operate in the industry in modern day architecture between client and the server. So there's another concept named scopes that come as part of the payload in your JWT token. This scope value can be of two types. For the first one is write and the other one is read. अब ऐसे सोचो कि क्लाइंट को सिर्फ रिट्रीवल ऑफ डेटा करना है. इन दोस केसेस द क्लाइंट वुड रिक्वेस्ट द JWT token for a particular user with only read scopes in it. And in case, in those workflows where the client wants the user to perform any update operation, create operation, in those cases, the client would request another token from the server, and that token will have write access. So this gives the server capability that it will restrict the operations such as update and create if read-based token is passed in the API call. And similarly, vice versa. If the client wants to generate a token with both these scopes, that can also be done. इससे थोड़ी liberty और control मिलता है server पे behavior control करने का of the incoming tokens. And in case there is a mismatch between the expectation of the server, it simply throws an error saying the token is not valid. Going ahead, what all fields have we talked about so far? The first one is subject, that was part of the payload, which is usually the user ID for the user generated tokens. The next one was issued at timestamp. The next one was expiry. And recently we have talked about scopes, which could be an array in the array format as well, for the cases where you want to have both read and write. Read, write. Sorry for the bad handwriting. Now, अब उस वाली प्रॉब्लम पे वापस आते हैं. अब हैकर के पास तुम्हारा टोकन है and he can do any operation with it. What is the probable solution that comes to your mind when you hear this problem out? You will say, why not block this user ID on the server? But जब तक client would raise an issue with the server that my token has been compromised, his data might have been leaked. This is a long process where the server will implement the logic when the client has reported such an issue, which is not a good approach. But definitely, it could be a possible way out. that the server blocks all the tokens generated for a particular user ID. And again, this is gonna be a cumbersome process because it has to maintain a blacklist kind of a thing in the DB and block all the calls coming with these particular user IDs in the incoming request. Not healthy. Along with this, the user will be permanently blocked from using the server, which again is not the right way because the user is a genuine user this time. He or she is not the hacker, and वो कोई भी operation कर नहीं पाएगा if we go by this particular approach. Let's move ahead. You might think, why not to change the secret key through which the token was generated, the JWT token was generated, and if the key gets changed in the validate method, all the calls would fail. चलेगा काम, पर इससे एक इशू है कि सारे इनवैलिडेट हो जाएंगे हमारे टोकन्स as soon as we change the secret key. Not a good approach, but another possible solution. Let's move ahead. You might think कि संचित अब ऐसा करते हैं कि छोटा TTL रख लेते हैं. Maybe 5 minutes is a good enough time. And if we keep a short TTL, then hacker can only use your token for 5 minutes. But again, it's a risk. Hacker can get your data and you are gone. So it is also a way to reduce the impact, but पूरा mitigate नहीं हुआ हमारा problem. Let's go ahead. अब इसके अलावा क्या कर सकते हैं? The biggest advantage, what makes JWT so popular, is its stateless nature. Now, in order to solve this problem of hacker extracting the user's token and starts using it, I'm bringing in a state parameters to reduce the impact, reduce the risk. And इससे होगा क्या? आओ समझाता हूँ. Consider the case at the time of login, the user passes in the user email, the user ID or user email along with the password in the login API call. At that point of time, the server generates a session ID parameter and keeps it as part of the JWT token. This session ID is not getting stored in the DB right now. It simply returns back to the client the JWT token, and this time instead of 4 parameters subject, issued at timestamp, expiry, we have another session ID parameter which is a GUID generated by the server. I hope this is clear. Now, at the time of logout functionality, consider the logout operation. At that point of time, what is going to happen? The API call will be made again to the server, and this time the token will be passed because we want to inform the server that the user with this particular JWT token is trying to log out. What it will do, it will extract the session ID parameter from it and it will validate the token. So these are the two things that the server is going to do, and it will store this information in the DB. So the server is storing the session IDs that are getting logged out from the system. And in case now that evil attacker gets access to the token, although it might be valid as per the semantics of JWT. However, since the session ID was stored in the database corresponding to logged out session IDs, the server will extract this information from the DB. It will check if it matches, the incoming JWT token matches with that present in my database, it's gonna reject this call. Therefore, the hacker will not get access to your assets and his call is gonna fail. तो इस अप्रोच का ड्रॉबैक क्या है, ये सोचो जरा. पॉज द वीडियो एंड थिंक अबाउट इट. इसका सबसे बड़ा ड्रॉबैक ये है कि एट द टाइम when the server is receiving any incoming token in the API call, it is checking whether that is present in the logout session ID DB or not, which is an expensive operation. लेकिन logout बहुत ज्यादा होते नहीं होंगे हमारे सिस्टम में. इसको कैसे रिड्यूस कर सकते हैं? We can bring in another level of caching which could be Redis. So if we bring in Redis over here, let me change the color of pen. If we bring in Redis over here, then it's gonna improve the overall latency of the system. So this Redis is gonna help us reduce the latency and we make the system better performant in nature. So this is another optimization that we can add. Going ahead, आज हमने बहुत सारी बातें कर ली. I hope I was able to convey my message about invalidation of JWT tokens and तुम्हें मजा आया होगा सुन के. If you have such a kind of interaction with the interviewer, he or she is definitely gonna be impressed. We have talked about advantages, disadvantages of JWT token, what makes it so safe, issues with JWT token. Invalidation is one issue that we talked about. What is the other issue with JWT tokens? So think of the case where the client wants to pass in information to the server which is highly sensitive in nature. अब ये सेंसिटिव इन्फॉर्मेशन JWT टोकन्स में तो ट्रैवल नहीं कर सकती बिकॉज इट इज ह्यूमन रीडेबल. एनीबडी कैन गो एंड टू JWT.io एंड रीड व्हाट ऑल पेलोड इन्फॉर्मेशन इज देयर. तो सोचो ये इन्फॉर्मेशन कैसे ट्रांसफर होती है. एंड वी हैव अ डिफरेंट कॉन्सेप्ट फॉर दिस विच इज JME, जेसन वेब इनक्रिप्शन. तो उसके बारे में बात करेंगे लेकिन नेक्स्ट वीडियो में. सो दिस इज ऑल्सो डन. मोर सिक्योर जेसन वेब एनक्रिप्शन, JWE. बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग वीडियो बनने वाली है इस पे, तो ध्यान रखना. जल्द मिलेंगे. Guys, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the video if you thought this was useful to you. And मजा आया तो कमेंट जरूर करो, और कोई भी डाउट हो do let me know. I am there to help you out. Apart from this, if you have any feedback for me, do let me know in the comments. अच्छी लगी, बुरी लगी, I am open to any kind of criticism and any kind of appreciation. So your comments would definitely mean a lot to me. Do let me know. Thank you.